What's up, everybody? I missed you. Hope you missed me as well. Welcome to the Walk of Shame for UFC Sacramento. So, I'm probably not going to take too much time with this because this wasn't exactly the greatest card in the world. Wasn't really a action-packed one either. So, not a whole lot that I really want to talk about. If there's anything in particular that you guys want to talk about, just go ahead, drop it in the chat. But let's go ahead and talk about the main event for however long it lasted. Let me check this official time. Let's see, the official time 16 seconds in the first round. Germaine De Randamie defeats Aspen Ladd with by TKO. Can't say I'm a fan of the stoppage. Not to say that had it gone on any further that Aspen Ladd would have made some miraculous recovery. It looks like GDR was setting up to hit her with some more ground and pound after she got dropped with that cross. But still, man, I'd like to see the fighters be able to fight it out just a little bit longer. Um, Maybe she did go out on that punch. You know, the replay made it look like she kind of went out and looked like she recovered before GDR could really go in there, and you saw her looks like she was prepping to dive for a single leg, and that's kind of the response you'd expect with someone who's as good of a grappler as Aspen Ladd. But man, I guess this just means that Germaine De Randamie has cemented herself as the next person in line to fight Amanda Nunes for the bantamweight title. Um, yeah, quite honestly, I don't want to see Amanda Nunes go in that direction. I don't want to see her defend the bantamweight title just yet because she just defended it last week. So I'd rather see her fight at featherweight. But let's just go ahead and talk about the stoppage because I see Rob Iman and Matt Wells from the Slip and Dip podcast. Shout out to both of you guys for joining in on the chat, asking about Herb Dean, asking about the stoppage, asking about the weigh-ins. I mean, there's a lot more to unpack besides the 16 seconds of action that we just witnessed. So obviously, yeah, not a fan of the stoppage. I do think that fight should have gone on longer. I think Herb Dean should have allowed Aspen Ladd to at least try to defend herself a bit more after that. If she took another shot or two, so be it. But I think a main event with a presumed number one contendership on the line here, I think it's worth just letting it go for a little bit longer. Jay, my homie at Sherdog, is pointing out to me on the Slack chat, reminding me that Herb Dean, just coming off of his win as the MMA referee of the year at the Fighters Only Awards last weekend. Kind of ironic. I mean, it is what it is. Just don't really like that stoppage. But Matt, I want to address what you said in your comment. Did Herb consider Ladd's appearance at weigh-ins or not? I wouldn't be surprised if he did. For anyone who's listening to this or watching this that did not actually see her weigh in yesterday, it was pretty bad. It looked pretty bad. Like she was on the scale shivering. They had to put the garment hoop around her, and it looked pretty bad. It looked pretty bad. And it's one of those things where you just wonder, like, how long is this system of weight cutting as it exists right now going to stand in place? How long are we going to allow these fighters to damn near kill themselves on the scale the day before they step into a fight against another trained killer? Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Now, we can't say for any certainty that Aspen Ladd's weight cut had something to do with excuse me, with her, getting dropped so fast. We can't say that. But I'm sure it didn't help at all. I'm sure it didn't help. But at the same time, we've seen Aspen Ladd have bad weight cuts and be fine and go out there and put on great performances. I was there at UFC 229 where she fought Tanya Evinger, and she looked like death stepping on that scale. Like she did yesterday, she was shivering. She was, she looked like out of sorts mentally elsewhere. I mean, it looked really bad. And she still went out there and handled business. Of course, that's not a sustainable model. That's not something that you can keep doing and keep doing and keep doing and expect to have success. especially when you're fighting someone who hits as hard as GDR, someone with her striking acumen. You don't want to go in there with your brain depleted of fluids ahead of that. So if you ask me, and I'm sure some of you folks in the chat right now agree with this, agree with this statement. The worst epidemic in mixed martial arts right now is weight cutting. It is not performance enhancing drugs. It is weight cutting. Weight cutting is the single most harmful thing going on in the sport, aside from obviously getting punched, kicked, kneed, and elbowed upside the head. But that's the sport. So that part will never go away. Weight cutting, on the other hand, is totally unnecessary. Totally unnecessary. And I see Rob in the chat saying he'd like to see Ladd go to 145. After a cut like that, after multiple cuts like that, I can't disagree with that statement. Now, I do think she's too small for featherweight. But then again, there's not much of a featherweight division right now, is there? The prize for winning this fight presumably is a fight against Amanda Nunes. Well, it's the same person you'd be fighting at 135 or 145. So in that sense, and maybe it's just the makeup of the division, it doesn't really matter if she's fighting at 135 or 145, at least right now, at least for the bantamweight and featherweight division title picture, because you're fighting the same person. So there needs to be something done for the weight cutting. There needs to be something put in place. And I'm not one who's going to sit here and offer the end all be all solution to this. If you guys have any good ideas in the chat, please go ahead and drop them. But right now, let's get this one out the way, because I'm sure somebody will mention it. One championship, apparently is fixed weight cutting. Until there's any evidence to suggest that, I'm not buying it until we have, footage of actual weigh-ins. We see the results of these hydration tests. We see what these guys are stepping on the scale like on the days that they're supposed to be weighing in. I'm not buying it at all. Boom Boom saying, is California the state that publishes the pre-fight weight? Yes, they are. I have not seen this. I've not seen this, but if you've seen this at all, please drop it on the chat. I've not seen the fight night weights for any of this event, so that should be very interesting. What she weighed in today as very, very interesting. But either way, I guess it just wasn't enough. Something needs to be done here. Let's see. Atheist for the call saying, just have the UFC put fighters into a weight class instead of fighters choosing their weight class. I get that idea, but once again, I don't want the promoter to have too much power, because that's when we've seen the promotion, pressure people to fight in particular weight classes. And it's always to their interest and not to the fighter's interest. For instance, Conor McGregor was offered a UFC contract only if he fought at featherweight, and this was coming off of winning the Cage Warriors lightweight title. So yes, he had a lot of success there, obviously, but definitely not ideal for his body. Also, I'm thinking back to John Lineker, former UFC fighter, current one championship fighter, John Lineker. From my understanding, he wanted to compete at bantamweight, but the UFC wanted him at flyweight, so he tried to make that cut. So I wouldn't trust the UFC as far as placing these fighters in the weight classes for them, unless, of course, there is a comprehensive system. And yes, man, I see using one system but actually enforce it with transparency. That is definitely a way to go. But transparency is a must. And the athletes need to have more control over it than just the UFC saying, you fight in this weight class or you fight in that weight class. I'm also reminded in California how this was the first event that I covered live, UFC 214. It was the Cormier and Jones rematch. On the undercard of that was Aljamain Sterling and Renan Barão. The California State Athletic Commission, the same commission that sanctioned this bout since it was in Sacramento, they wouldn't allow Renan Barão to fight at bantamweight. That fight had to be contested at a 140-pound catch weight. So, I mean, more weight classes would be helpful. actual transparency in a hydration system and whatnot would be helpful as well. But something needs to be done. Something really needs to be done. And we can't say for sure if Aspen Ladd's loss tonight was a direct result of that bad weight cut. But damn it, I'm sure it didn't hurt. I mean, I'm sure it didn't help it. I'm sure it did her no favors taking a punch from GDR. All right. So let's talk about what's next. So Aspen Ladd faces her first defeat, and I don't think that's really that big of a deal at the end of the day, at least for the long term of her career. She is, she's a very promising fighter. She's someone who, with a win, would have easily deserved a title opportunity, although I don't think she was quite ready for it. But there are options for her. I mean, I know I was on the MMA fighting post-fight show last week for UFC 239 saying that I think Holly Holm should retire. Should Holly Holm decide to stay active, hey, go ahead, put that Aspen Ladd fight together. That was something that was supposed to happen, I believe, at UFC 235 until some contractual disputes derailed that from happening. But that sounds like a good enough fight, a good way for either one of them to rebound and kind of find their way. So Rob suggesting Ladd versus Megan Anderson at 145. That doesn't sound very bad to me. You would hope if Ladd were to face Megan Anderson at 145, that Ladd coming in as a smaller fighter, because Megan Anderson is a true featherweight. She cuts to get to featherweight. She is a very, very big featherweight. So you'd hope for her sake that Ladd, being the smaller fighter, would have a rougher time initiating the grappling and getting the fight to the floor, which is her clearest shot to success against Megan Anderson. So I do like that idea. I'm not mad at that at all. I wouldn't even mind seeing Kat Zingano against Aspen Ladd as well. That would be a fairly decent test. So there are options for Aspen Ladd. Now, as far as GDR, I mean, obviously, she was coming into this as the number one contender in the rankings at bantamweight. If she wants to, I mean, granted, if the UFC trusts her to do this, because I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of lingering bad blood about how her run as the featherweight champion went. I wouldn't mind GDR parlaying this into a shot at Amanda Nunes at featherweight. Depending on the results of the Felicia Spencer and Cyborg fight coming up next week, I don't mind that at all. I don't mind that. I mean, it will mean that both fighters aren't cutting weight, which I just went on a rant about. So I think you guys know where I stand on that. Excuse me. But yeah, man, I think that wouldn't be a bad idea if either Spencer or Cyborg come out of that fight victorious but banged up and unable to compete for a little while, and Nunes, who obviously took no damage in the fight against Holly Holm last week, if she wants to go ahead and just defend that featherweight belt against GDR, keep in mind she does have a win over GDR. I believe that was in Strikeforce. So yeah, I like that for Nunes. I like that for her. The main thing I want for the title picture is Amanda Nunes defending the featherweight title to cement her as the champ for both divisions. That's all I really want. She was the first person to drop back down to the lower weight class and defend that belt. So yeah, I want to see her go back up to featherweight and defend that belt against, whether GDR tries to parlay this into a featherweight title shot, or it's a Cyborg rematch, or it's Felicia Spencer. Sounds good to me. Oh, Matt, Nunes versus GDR was Fight Night 31 in 2013. So a little bit wrong on that one, but that was quite some time ago. Tonight was UFC Fight Night 155. So that shows you how much has changed in 6 years with that event. So, all right, let's check some of these comments. Tommaso Mark saying, "What's up? What is up, Tommaso Mark? Good to see you joining the chat again, my brother." Can we see Germaine versus Ketlin Vieira next as a true number one contender fight for a shot at Nunes? I like that idea. Now, especially if Nunes wants to go deal with the featherweight belt next, it's a good way to keep that division rolling. It's a good way to keep everything active and make sure that there's no real stagnation between fights for GDR or Vieira. So I like that a lot. That should be style-wise should be a very interesting fight. So yeah, not bad at all. Atheist for the cause. Oh, love the controversial nicknames. Aspen Ladd versus Yana Kunitskaya. I'm not mad at that either. Kunitskaya would be, she just had that, debated win against Marion Renault. I'm not mad at that fight. Kunitskaya also a former Invicta champion. If Ladd were to get that win, that's a good name to have on your resume right there. So that's not a bad one for Ladd. Let's see. Tommaso saying, who do you think gets the bonuses tonight? I think Emmett and Feely deserve 50K. Faber's getting a bonus. I'm pretty certain of that. Faber's getting a bonus. Feely and Emmett, Feely, Emmett, Faber deserve bonuses. Let me look at who else had a standout performance tonight. The names aren't really rolling off my head because this was not the action pack. Jonathan Martinez had a very, very, very nice stoppage win as well on the prelim. So those would be the four people that get bonuses, if you ask me. Jonathan Martinez, Urijah Faber, Josh Emmett, and Andre Feely. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the co-main event where Uriah Hall returned to competition to finish Ricky Simón in 46 seconds into the first round. I certainly did not expect to see that. I definitely picked Ricky Simón, and obviously no shade to Urijah Faber. He is one of the pioneers in mixed martial arts, especially for the lighter weight classes. He was the face of the WEC and the ridiculous legendary cards that organization put on. Urijah Faber was front and center for most of it. I was more surprised because, Faber has been off for a couple of years, man. I typically never pick the fighter that's had the long layoff. And especially the way Faber went into the layoff, like he retired. His life has changed a lot since. He's got a kid now. I don't know if he's married or if he's engaged, but he's got a stable relationship with a child now. Obviously, been a man who's been about his business, so he's been tending to his businesses during the last couple of years, and just seems like, hey, past 40 years old, and life moves on, man. Life definitely moves on. But clearly it didn't for Faber, and he wanted to go back in there and get one. But I just thought Ricky Simón, man, being such a highly touted prospect, I thought he would remind Faber why he retired tonight. I thought that would be the outcome. Simón put on a clinic against Hanayaya. Forget when that was, but you guys remember when he fought Hanayaya, and that was a very good performance, and I thought that was kind of like the breakout party for him. I just thought it would continue against Urijah Faber, because keep in mind too the way Urijah Faber started losing. He started losing not because he got old. Faber has always taken good care of his body, always made sure that he was in good shape when he wasn't competing, always stayed on his nutrition and whatnot, and took very, very good care of himself, and never looked anywhere near his age. He's the youngest looking 40-year-old you'll ever see. That ain't a brother, obviously, but that's another story. So I thought it was because, Faber stopped evolving as a fighter. His last losses were simply because he didn't change his game up at all. Like Faber has essentially been fighting the same fight since the WEC. So now when I looking back at his record, I mean, his last win was before tonight, obviously, was Brad Pickett in what was his retirement fight 3 years ago. Well, 2.5 years ago. And Pickett is a guy who also was kind of frozen in time and didn't really evolve his game. But you see, like, the results of the rematches with Dominic Cruz and how Cruz kept evolving his game. Jimmy Rivera being kind of like a new wave sort of fighter. Frankie Edgar, also a guy who able to change his game up a lot. So that's kind of been his kryptonite, is these guys that evolve. And Ricky Simone being such a young guy, like, he is of that evolution. That evolution is normal to him. So that's why I didn't expect him to pull off the victory. But happy for him in that sense. I'm happy for him, to get the hometown victory in front of his wife, in front of, I'm not sure if the child was there, but, in front of his wife, in front of the hometown fans, in a place that he literally created the mixed martial arts scene of. So it's always good. It's always a feel good moment. And the one time I actually don't mind hearing California Love is Urijah Faber walking to the cage. Excuse me. Yeah, man. So as far as what's next for Faber, I see got a couple suggestions here in the chat. Rob saying Faber versus Rob Font should be next. I don't know if you suggested that just because his name is also Rob, but I do like that suggestion. Rob Font obviously has a little extra time on his hands since the Lineker fight fell apart at the last minute. And obviously Faber took no damage in this. So if he's willing to just jump right back in there, I say go ahead, book that fight. That sounds pretty good to me. I saw another suggestion on Twitter that seemed pretty good. But forgive me for not being able to remember it right now. Let's see. Well, let me address some of this stuff in the chat here. Had Simone Faber look rocked early but recovered, then the big shot, early stoppage, game over. You know what? I do need to watch the replay on this stoppage because I thought that might have been a little early. I didn't quite get the sense that was a good stoppage as it happened, but also it happened so fast. I didn't quite know what to think about it, but it seemed just a tad bit premature to me, just a tad bit. Ricky Simone looked very confused as the stoppage was handed down. So I don't know if it was something going on in the air tonight in Sacramento. I made a little joke on Twitter that Josh Emmett saying in his post-fight speech that he was going to buy the first round for everyone at his after party prompted the referees to want to end the night early so they can get a free drink. Something to consider. Just my goofball considering. All right, let's see what else we got in the chat. People forget Faber has power in his hands, but the only fight for Faber is a title shot. I don't see him fighting his way back up the rankings. I also think guys like Rivera would still beat him. I think Jimmy Rivera would still beat him as well. I think, Peter Yan, Aljamain Sterling, the guys that should be in line for this bantamweight title shot, I think they will beat him. I think Marlon Moraes beats him as well. But I don't think he belongs in a title fight. If he was put into a title fight, it would simply be a function of his popularity and nothing else. Just taking a look back at his record, he's had 2 wins in a row. One against a guy who also was retiring in Brad Pickett, and another against Ricky Simone, who, aside from the Hanayaya fight, hadn't really been tested at the highest of levels. Had the win over Frankie Saenz, which preceded which was followed by a 2-fight losing streak against Cruz and Rivera. Like, I don't see it unless it's just a function of his popularity. And quite honestly, that wouldn't surprise me because we don't, we just don't know what the UFC is up to as far as some of this matchmaking for the title fights at this point. So that would be my assumption right there. Faber would only get that if it was a function of popularity. I really don't think, though, that Faber should do anything but try to fight his way up the ladder if he intends on making this, a second run, a second career. Maybe, just maybe. Excuse me, still fighting off my cold. My cough lingering from the cold I caught last weekend in Vegas. So apologize for that. But yeah, man, I think Faber should be fighting his way back up, or he just fights, as like a high-level gatekeeper. And I think that's fine. You can always put him on a main or a co-main event. You can always throw him in Sacramento or California, period, for that matter. So there's always a place for Urijah Faber as long as he wants to fight. But, it would not be fair to the rest of that division. And I know fair is not a function of the UFC. Fair is not an actual business consideration. But it doesn't make any sense for Faber to be in a title fight. All right, let's see what else we got. I don't want to see Faber versus Cejudo. Doesn't seem interesting. It seems like it might have been an interesting fight, a couple years ago. But even if it was an interesting fight, it just doesn't make sense. Henry Cejudo um just dominated for the bantamweight title. And he has a line of bantamweight challengers that make more sense for him. He also has a featherweight title to defend. And since it looks like that division is going to be hanging around, Joseph Benavidez is the guy. So I don't think Urijah Faber should be in that mix at all. At all. Take the fun fights. Go ahead, take the more favorable style matchups. Go ahead, fight Rob Font. You fight fights like that have some meaning, but aren't, right up against the title picture. If he finds his way back there, so be it. But yeah, that's where that stands for me. Let's see, Ricky Simone versus Alcantara should be next. I like that. Yuri Alcantara and Ricky Simone makes a lot of sense to me. Is Faber calling Cejudo out to get revenge for Dillashaw? I don't think Faber has anything in his heart to avenge anything for TJ Dillashaw, especially beyond the fact that their camp had a very notable falling out with Dillashaw, but also in light of the EPO, also considering that Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt had such a heated buildup for both of their fights, in which he knocked out Cody Garbrandt. Now with the EPO hanging over his head and that suspension, it casts a shadow of doubt over the legitimacy of those two wins. So I really don't think that Faber has thought about getting revenge for Dillashaw in the least bit. Let's see. Slip and Dip, Matt saying it was a feel-good moment to see Faber win clean tonight. A fight against Moraes is nothing he'd shut up for, in my opinion. Agreed. Moraes is not the guy you want to fight right now if you're Urijah Faber. I think he's a better athlete, and he's more versatile in the skill set, has a killer instinct. I don't think it would be a good day for Urijah Faber. And quite frankly, there are not many people at bantamweight that are going to defeat Marlon Moraes. Let's just get that out there straight up and down. Nothing against Faber. Moraes is just that nice with it. Let's see. Wouldn't someone willing to duck Cyborg also want to duck Nunes? Spin the paper saying, that's funny. I mean, if we want to run with that, yeah. But still, I don't think GDR. Now, granted, I didn't read this headline, but GDR, I believe, said something about her not doing the Cyborg fight because of some agreement to fight Amanda Nunes. So if that's the case, keep in mind she already fought Amanda Nunes. So if that's the case, I don't see why she would duck somebody you already fought, duck somebody that you were trying to fight again. It doesn't make sense to me. Josh Simmons versus Zabit Magomed Sharapov should be next. Rob, we will talk about that fight in just a moment. I do like that suggestion. Cejudo fights Benavidez. When he returns, should Aldo hold out or fight Cruz? If you're Aljo, I say fight Cruz. I say fight Cruz. You don't wait for the title shot if it's not guaranteed. And chances, if you book yourself against Cruz, chances are fight's not going to happen anyway. So just go ahead, go through that, show yourself willing to go through the motions. Faber versus Luke Saunders. That's not a bad one either. I'm not mad at that. Atheist for call saying, you're fantastic, man. You're so knowledgeable. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. My brain literally hurts trying to think of this stuff all the time. So that's fun. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue talking about the rest of the card. Make sure my screen is ready. So we had in the fight before, Josh Emmett finishes Mirsad Bektic, or Bektix, I guess, as they were saying his name should be pronounced on the broadcast, at 4 minutes 25 seconds into the first round with a jab to ground and pound. Man, Josh Emmett has some dynamite in his hands. That guy hits very, very hard. And so does Bektic. Now, the thing that I found interesting about this fight, they stood in front of each other and just swung wildly for the first 4 minutes of this. And nobody landed. I mean, this was sort of the fight where it was kind of like you had to, like, whoever got hit first was going to go down. Like that's probably the easiest way to say it. Whoever was going to land first was going to win this fight because they were throwing with just no love lost. I particularly liked the uppercut that Emmett landed underneath Bektik's guard as he was trying to recover on the ground. That of course sealed the deal. Josh Emmett is Josh Emmett, man, is something else. For a guy to start MMA so late, he's made some waves. He's definitely made some waves. Man, I like what he's doing. I like what he's doing, man. It was a good night for Team Alpha Male in that regard. As far as what's next for Bektik, man, you got to wonder if he's in the mood to do some soul searching. He's a guy that we have had a lot of high hopes for. He was being thought of as like the next real serious title threat. Excuse me. And for good reason. He's a very talented guy. He's a very athletic guy. But to have the Derek Elkins loss, granted that was some time ago, and now to have this, it's kind of like those setbacks are just coming up at the wrong time for Bektik. And he's also not the guy who's very active. He's not the guy who fights all the time. I mean, I think they said on the broadcast that he had, 7 dates that he hasn't made for the UFC. 7 times the fight was booked that he didn't make the date. So, I mean, that granted it wasn't always his fault, but that's not a good track record, man. Think about the last guy who didn't always make his dates that hits hard, that tends to be in some barn burner fights. It's very athletic. And think about where he is now, John Lineker. John Lineker is no longer with the UFC because he couldn't make the dates. So when you lose and you consistently don't make the dates, not the easiest spot to be in. Not the easiest spot to be in. Yeah, man. I'd like to see. I see Tommaso Mark suggesting. I'm sorry. Am I reading this wrong? Yeah, I'm reading that wrong. Sorry, my bad. Excuse me. Rob saying Mirsad Bektik versus Dan Ige should be next. Not a bad suggestion at all. But I do think it's time for Bektik to kind of hit the reset button and do some soul searching and figure out what direction he's trying to go into. As far as Josh Emmett is concerned, man, the featherweight rankings, let me pull those up really quick so I can do a quick glance at who could possibly be next for Josh Emmett. I wouldn't mind seeing Zabit Magomed Sharipov as Rob suggested earlier. That wouldn't be a bad one at all. I wouldn't mind seeing Aldo. I wouldn't mind seeing an Aldo fight. That makes a lot of sense to me. Oh, look, like clockwork. Tim also dropping that also in the chat. What's up, man? Bektik versus Moicano. Also a suggestion of Mark. Sounds good. Jay, my homie at Sherdog, is dropping the suggestion that Josh Emmett fighting the Korean Zombie could be a good option. That sounds like a great fight, but quite frankly, I'd rather see Korean Zombie headline the Boston card against Calvin Kattar. That to me is the fight to make. So that really would be a fun one. Rob also suggesting Emmett versus Kattar will be a banger. I agree on all counts. Like here's the thing. This is featherweight, just like lightweight, just like welterweight, is one of those divisions that's so stacked that you can just mix and match these guys up and you will be very happy with the results. But as it stands, I say Emmett take on Aldo. I say put Calvin Kattar and Korean Zombie on that rumored Boston Fight Night card. Make that the main event. And there you have it. You have fantastic evenings of people hitting each other in the face, what we all came for. All right, so let's see what else, because quite honestly, I don't think we really want to talk about too many of these fights. If there's something in particular you want to talk about, by all means, drop in the chat. All right, so let's talk about this split decision. Carl Robeson defeats Wellington Turman. I didn't quite agree with this decision. Please tell me in the chat if you agree with this. I had Turman winning, but I will say this though. I will say Cole Robertson. He was lucky to squeak this one away because he was definitely getting dominated in a lot of the grappling exchanges. His athleticism, made him survive this. Him just being a better athlete, him being able to explode out of certain positions, and just being able to strong arm his way out of some bad positions is what got him out of this fight. I'm also saying he had Turman winning the last 2 rounds. I agree as well. I think Turman won those last 2 rounds. I don't quite understand what the judges were saying, but I'm also not ready to just kick over the table because I'm so angry about the decision. But for and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Turman took this fight on short notice. No, this was his UFC debut. So I will have to. Always got to commend the guy coming in on short notice and doing as well as he did, having Robertson in some very bad positions, threatening with repeated submission attempts, controlling a lot of the ground. Man, Robertson was lucky to get out of this one. I don't really think we want to talk about this one much further than that. All right, Marvin Vettori versus Cesar Ferreira. Marvin Vettori wins this fight by unanimous decision. I had no issues with the scorecards there, and not really a whole lot to take away from this fight. Vettori is, he's good as we thought. I don't want to hype up the notion about him. The story of him getting the split decision. Having one judge see him defeat Israel Adesanya last year because, hey man, that's old news. And also like Adesanya is such a different guy that result means like nothing to me at this point. It means literally nothing. If you were to put them in the cage against each other right now, that's just not going to happen. Adesanya will not be vulnerable in the same positions that he was in their first fight. So it's a moot point. But he's doing what he should do, and that's take confidence from it. Seeing Adesanya's success after that defeat, makes sense for him to use that as a boost for his profile. So it makes sense in that regard. But I didn't see anything in this fight that made me get particularly excited again about Vettori. He's a good fighter. He is, and he has a lot of potential, but I want to stop it there. I want to see more from him because I say that because Ferreira has proven himself to be a formidable opponent for a lot of guys, but I think he just didn't do a lot of the stuff that was necessary to win this fight. For instance, he just seemed on cruise control, if you ask me, like no head movement whatsoever. Like he seemed to just be relying on the fact that he hits hard too. And that is just not a good idea, especially when you're not even concerned about your own defense. So I think a lot of this was just as much about what Ferreira did wrong as Vettori did right. So let's pump the brakes on the Vettori hype train, especially in regards to Israel Adesanya's success since their meeting. Tommaso suggesting Vettori versus Brad Tavares. Brad Tavares, I think, makes a lot of sense because he's one of those guys that you can always put a middleweight up against and have a good idea where they stand. You can have some notion of what they have to offer. And once again, give the Israel Adesanya example. Adesanya's win over Tavares made it very clear that, Adesanya might be that dude. If you had doubts because of the Vettori fight, those doubts should have gone to bed. So I'm with that. Vettori versus the Buriut and Jutko winner. You know what, Rob? I'm gonna one up with you on that. I honestly am not giving that fight a lot of thought. I do know Krzysztof Jutko is definitely a solid test for a lot of guys, so that makes sense in that regard. Brad Tavares, off the top of my head, would probably be my preferred guy to face him. If gun to my head and I had to make this decision right now. I'm also saying Costa would murder Marvin, but I admire the fact that Marvin asked for Costa because a lot of people don't. Yeah, a lot of people aren't exactly too eager to fight Paulo Costa, but Costa's got other business. Costa's going to be fighting Yoel Romero in August in Anaheim. I'll be live on the scene for that one. So, excuse me. Hope to give you guys some good updates about that, some good on the ground coverage. But I, as far as that Costa Romero fight, I'm not too enthused about Costa's chances in that. I think this is a big, big, big step up that I don't quite think he's ready for. Vettori, another option for Vettori could be Urijah Faber. I mean, not Faber, Uriah Hall. I think he's another guy, a solid guy you can put up against, some prospects that you're thinking about and see where they stand. That fight should also provide some fireworks as well. So, yeah, I think there's some options for Vettori, but he needs more tests before we start really throwing him to the wolves and before we start boosting up that split decision loss to Adesanya. All right, so let's see what else we had on the card here. John Allen defeats Mike Rodriguez by unanimous decision. Not a whole lot I really want to talk about in that fight. Agree with the decision. It was a pretty grueling fight, though. It was a pretty grueling fight. And Rodriguez looked like he was going to win it early with a lot of those power strikes. But a complete disregard for defense, I think, opened the door for John Allen to gain control of this fight. So, let's see. Andre Feely, good Lord have mercy. Did he have a great performance, which ended up winning a performance of the night bonus against Shaman Moraes? Man, I've got to talk about that that setup, the combination that began the finishing sequence. That that right cross to the head kick from the right leg. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I always get excited to see combinations like that because, of course, as you guys know, most of the striking that you see in the average MMA fighter is based on boxing and Muay Thai. A lot of boxing and Muay Thai has the same principles: up down, left right, to kind of get into this rhythm defensively where you block here and then the next one's coming, so you block there. And that's the typical pattern that you'll see in boxing and Muay Thai, and obviously the striking of those two styles bleeding over into MMA translates as well. But you don't always see guys able to land punches with one side and throw a kick off that same side, especially a head kick. I love to see that. I love to see that. So way back in my days as an amateur MMA coach, of coaching one guy, that was something we drilled a lot. And it came in handy because that sequence won him a fight and won his first amateur title. So it's something that most people don't expect to see. They get into that natural rhythm of left, right, up, down. And when you have left, left, or you have right, right, it really kind of throws you off. It really throws off a lot of people. So excellent work by Andre Feely on that. And another thing that I admire about what he did in that fight, excuse me, was the patience he showed. The patience was key to this victory. If he were to go in there after landing such a great combination on Moraes and rush in recklessly, rush in trying to get the finish instantly, he could have got put down because Moraes is a very, very hard hitter and a guy who is not opposed at all to knocking your head clean off your shoulders. He has the power to do so. So you want to approach that cautiously. So he let him be hurt. He let him stumble around a little bit longer. He let himself get his own bearings about it, calm himself, measure the distance, and then pick the shots more strategically. That is always the better solution than to charge in recklessly. Charging in recklessly has worked well for a lot of people, but didn't work so well for guys like Pat Barry, guys like Pete Sale when he lost to Scott Smith. So it is something to keep in mind. If you hurt the opponent, sometimes it's best to stand back and measure and strategically plan how you will place the next several shots to get that finish. All right. I'm assuming that MMA on Point, the YouTube account, is being manned by Jason Hartley. What up, my man? Great time seeing you in Vegas for UFC 239. Said Feely had Diego's coach. That was the difference. Yes, Diego Sanchez's coach. Wow, wow, oh wow. Um, man, oh man, oh man. We could talk forever about how silly the coaching for Diego Sanchez was at UFC 239. So if you guys want to check out my thoughts on that, you can read The Good, Bad, and the Ugly for UFC 239. The last piece of it was all about how trash that coaching was. Okay. All right. So I see some of you guys dropping some other things in the chat, and we will get to those. Let me just make sure that there's nothing else on this card that I really want to talk about. Of course, we got to talk Pena versus Montaño, excuse me. I was impressed with Montaño. I was, and I know she gets a bad rap for her failed run as the inaugural flyweight champion. But she looked good in that first round. I don't know how much of it was because Juliana Pena had been out for so long that maybe that first round was her kind of warming back up to it all. But if you're out grappling Juliana Pena, even if it is just for that first round, that's pretty dope. That's pretty dope. Not mad at that at all. Yeah, and Pena, she emerged to be Pena like we remember her. So I'm kind of curious what's next for her. Rob dropping a good gem, right? Pena versus Holly Holm. I would rather see the Ladd fight against Holly Holm, but that's a good option as well. And man, Pena has a clear path to victory in that against Holly Holm. But once again, Pena's striking isn't quite refined. It's gotten better, but it's clearly not refined. So see, Tommaso saying I was impressed with Nico as well. You reckon she returns to flyweight? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. She obviously had a lot of problems making flyweight, and I know apparently she had some other health issues that were screwing her up at the same time. So, does the UFC book her at flyweight again? That's a big question. Rob suggesting that she might get cut, and that was talk on the Surdog Slack chat as well that maybe she gets cut with a loss here tonight. It's possible as well. The promotion obviously isn't too happy with her. So I don't think she really has a long leash to develop, and maybe it's best for her to leave the promotion and get some more fights elsewhere and then come back if the UFC would have her. It might be better for her because I think the bad blood, the deck might just be always stacked against her in the UFC. It just might be. But I do think that she gets an undue amount of criticism due to her flyweight title run. You know, she was suffering from some health problems apparently, and no, despite the fact that her against Shevchenko probably wouldn't bode well for her, I find it highly unlikely that she was literally afraid to fight Shevchenko, especially considering that she made it to fight week for one of those bookings. I don't think that she went through training camp, made it to fight week, got there in Dallas. I believe that fight would have taken place in Dallas at UFC 228, if I'm not mistaken. I seriously doubt that she got there in Dallas and then all of a sudden got too scared to fight. So let's put that narrative to bed right away. Atheist for a Call is saying, doesn't Pena have to work up to Holly Holm? How would that make sense for Holm? It would make sense for Holm simply because she just lost. Like, she just got finished in the first round. So yeah, I don't think she has a lot of leeway necessarily in this. And she's still pretty high in the rank, like Juliana Pena, still pretty high in the rankings. So despite her with the layoff, her having a win, a win against a former champion, albeit a champion that not many people give a lot of respect to, but a champion nonetheless, should put her right back in the active rankings. So let's see. Let me take a look at what the rankings for bantamweight look like right now. And Yes, for obvious reasons. Juliana Pena is not on them as she has been inactive. So yeah, I like I like that fight, but I still would rather see Holm versus Ladd. Okay, let's see what. Oh, Ryan Hall versus Darren Elkins. We have to talk about this. I would be a horrible person if I did not talk about this. You talk about one of the best bad fights you will ever see in your life. That fight was a mess. It was terrible. It was ridiculous, and I loved every second of it. Man, Ryan Hall has like this weird mishmash of skills that make literally no sense to it. The closest example I can think of is like Aljamain Sterling before this run that he's on now, where he would he was this amazing wrestler who didn't really have very good boxing, but could kick you to death and you just throw all sorts of wild kicks, and it just looks so weird, and his setups into the takedowns off the kicks were so strange. Ryan Hall is like is like the 3.0 version of that. Like I've never seen someone just throw spin kicks like they're jabs, and then they actually use it to set up an Imanari roll. Like it doesn't make sense. It physically makes zero sense. But let's just get this out there in the world. The UFC not having this guy do a post-fight interview was ridiculous. It was insanity. Ryan Hall is a guy that I think a lot of people would get behind if they knew he existed. His fights are always interesting to watch. However bizarre they might be, however ludicrous the combinations may seem, he is must-see TV. And he's a weird personality. Man, you've got to put that guy in front of a camera with a microphone in his face as often as possible. Even if his interviews aren't spectacular, he is such a weird personality and fights in such an odd style that you got to do it. You got to showcase that weirdness. Because, man, that weirdness plays out in the cage, and it's always entertaining to watch. Even if I'm sitting here talking about how terrible it is, it still was great. It was fantastic. See, Rob saying, give Hall Andre Feely next, and the winner gets a ranking. You know what? The timetable works out, obviously, because they just fought on the same card, but I'd rather see Hall just jump right back into the top 10, agreeing with the homie Jason Hartley here. Hall should just go right into the top 10. Go in for a top 10 fight. Let me take a look at these featherweight rankings one more again. Man, Josh Emmett sounds good. I know I just said Emmett versus Aldo, but Josh Emmett sounds like a good one too. Hey, maybe Mirsad Bektic wouldn't be a bad one. Arnold Allen, ranked at 13 right now, so that's a little bit too low. Bektic at 12. Yeah, it is some options here. Maybe we just need to pump the brakes and see what some of these future matchups at featherweight do, and some of these other bookings. But Hall versus Zabit Magomed Sharipov sounds totally nuts. Totally nuts. Rob saying Elkins should consider retirement. I'm not opposed to that. Yeah, man, Darren Elkins has been around for a while, and he's taking a lot of damage. You see what I did there? He's taking a lot of damage in his career, and I don't know if it's a function of Hall having some very sharp and accurate spin kicks that just seem to hit the mark every time. But man, he was getting dropped a lot. He got dropped, what, 4 times or something in this fight? You know, kind of worrisome. Kind of worrisome. With a fight style like his, a guy who is obviously not shy of a war, and he's been in quite a few of them. Yeah, man, you got to start wondering when it's time to let it go. But Elkins considering retirement doesn't sound like the worst idea in the world. Not at all. Let's see. Robert is saying Hall versus Stevens must see TV. Yes, actually, I did see that suggestion. I believe Casey of MMA Fighting suggested that on Twitter. That sounds like a fantastic. If you're looking at Ryan Hall as like a good striker now, which Man, didn't think we'd be saying that, but he really might put on quite a performance against Jeremy Stephens. So why not? Why not do that? Yeah, man, that's pretty nuts. Okay, so hold on, let me see something here. I think my power cord just fell out. Let me plug this up before my computer dies on me. Sorry, everybody. And all right, we're plugged in. All right, good. I'm also saying I think Hall was just pretty accurate with the spin kicks. Possible, very possible that it was just the accuracy of the spin kicks that did it. Okay. Thought atheist for the call saying I really thought Magomed Sharapov was very underwhelming in his last fight. I didn't. I was there for that one too. I don't think he was underwhelming. I think it was just kind of I mean, he was fighting Jeremy Stephens, man. He was fighting a tough test of a seasoned veteran, and a lot of that fancy stuff just wasn't going to work against him. Of course, Hall might be trying to pull off some of that same fancy stuff, but he does it in a much different way. It's a lot trickier. It's a lot more unorthodox than Zabit. So I think we had our expectations too high for Magomed Sharapov in that fight. That I think that's really the main function of it. It just didn't seem like he wasn't the killer because he was fighting a guy who was that good. So, but as far as Ryan Hall goes, I think that's a good test for Ryan Hall. Jeremy Stephens makes a lot of sense to me. Okay. All right. So we'll just briefly go through this. Jonathan Martinez, who also won a performance of the night bonus, defeats Pingyong Liu with a knee in the third round. Great work by both guys, actually. Martinez and Liu, they showed some very good striking there. Liu just seemed to not want to deal with his wrestling game. He's part of the Chinese imports that have come through the Team Alpha Male and kind of re-energized that camp, if you ask me, including Song Yadong, who had his serious punch combination get him a win, against Alejandro Perez last week. So exciting stuff coming out of Team Alpha Male. But Jonathan Martinez spoils the party for the Sacramento crowd there with that victory, but a great one. Brianna Van Buren looked incredible against Livia Souza. Van Buren, of course, the Invicta champion who just left the strawweight title sitting there in Invicta, as all the strawweight champions do in that organization after her one night tournament victory in Phoenix Rising. She looked fantastic against Souza. I liked her controlled aggression. I liked her getting those takedowns and just not shy of any position. She really showed some great work out there against Souza. And Benito Lopez gets the decision over Vince Morales. I had the fight scored for Morales, but I wasn't too angry at that decision. Okay, so let's go ahead. And I know you guys were asking me some questions about other fights, so we can go ahead and address some of those. I can't wait for UFC 240 with Holloway and Edgar, Cyborg, Jeff Neal, lots of good names. Yes, UFC 240 should be a beautiful, beautiful card. So I'm going to go ahead and skip through here, take a look at some of the fights on that one, just to, if you can just drop what you think is your sleeper fight for that card. Jeff Neal, Nico Price definitely belongs in that conversation. Alejandro Pantoja and Davison Figueiredo. It's probably going to be my sleeper pick for that. And it has increased importance now, as it looks like the UFC is, in fact, keeping the flyweight division around. So isn't that something special? That should be pretty cool. That adds an extra layer of intrigue behind what otherwise would be a very exciting fight to watch. Okay, what else we got? If I'm missing your question, just redrop it in the chat here because I'm trying to scroll through a lot of stuff right now. Tommaso Mark asking, am I picking Leon Edwards or RDA next week? I'm probably going to lean toward Leon Edwards. I think he's a guy who we keep sleeping on. We keep sleeping on this guy. RDA obviously is a very dangerous man. He has a relentless pace, and he's shown himself able to handle the challenges that are presented at welterweight for the most part. But Leon Edwards is a guy who's shown himself capable of doing everything with the best of them. A guy that can go to the ground with Gunnar Nelson with ease. You know, a guy who is outstriking Donald Cerrone. Like Leon Edwards is a guy that we keep sleeping on, and I don't get why. I really don't understand why. So while I do think RDA is going to be a good test, I think RDA is not going to look bad out there. I think the size and I think the speed difference is going to work out for Edwards. I think that should get him the win. Just the build. He's a lankier guy. He's got a little more reach. Those little factors I think will make the difference. So give me Leon Edwards for that. Of course, what's that next weekend? Next weekend, actually, it's my birthday next weekend. So I doubt I'll be able to do one of these. In fact, what I can do to make it up to you guys, we can do a preview show. So hit me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. If you want to see a preview show, if you want to just talk about some of these matchups before they happen, all for that, or we can just delay the Walk of Shame until Sunday. Either option is up to you guys. You just hit me up and let me know which one you want. Let's see. Atheist for the Cause saying, I hate seeing Greg Hardy on the main card. Yes, as do I. Greg Hardy does not belong on the main card. I don't think he should be there at all. But the Juan Adams fight should be interesting. I anticipate Juan Adams to put him out. That's kind of what I'm thinking. David Dean asking, will we see Urijah versus Cejudo? I certainly hope not, at least in the current iteration of both gentlemen. I don't want to see Urijah Faber fight the bantamweight champion in Henry Cejudo. Doesn't make any sense at all from a ranking standpoint, from any sort of sporting integrity. It doesn't make sense. Of course, it makes sense dollar sign wise, but quite frankly, I think the UFC will be better off just promoting legitimate fights. And if you want to get somewhat illegitimate with the fights and you want the name value, you can wait till Cruz is healthy. I think that fight doesn't make a lot of sense from a competitive standpoint, at least as far as Cruz earning that title shot. But you have a much better case for that than you do against Urijah Faber. Let's see here. Thoughts on Felder versus Edson rematch. I feel Paul deserved higher rank. Maybe Al instead. Who do I favor? Who do I favor? I kind of want to lean toward Paul Felder in this one. My initial thought when they first fought was that we had seen the ceiling on Paul Felder. I thought we saw the ceiling on Paul Felder in that Barboza fight, but I think him as an analyst has increased his skills as a fighter. I think he's thinking things even better than he was before. I really want to see what he looks like against Barboza, who, while I don't think he's on the downslide, Barboza has seen better times. Barboza has had some difficult challenges as of late, so I'm leaning toward Felder. It should be an exciting fight. Felder might take this one. Let's see here. Hardy is the UFC's next villain. Yeah, I think so. I think they're just embracing that. I can't remember who I spoke with, but a fellow media member who's a friend of mine. It was like a personal conversation, just chatting about the fights as we tend to do. He asked like, do you think the UFC just booked Greg Hardy on the same card as Rachel Ostovich to just get in front of all the controversy and just say, hey, establish a baseline of how bad it could be so that way it can never get worse. And I think as as we keep seeing Greg Hardy over and over again, that seems to work because it's like, all right, yeah, he's on the main card. Yeah, he was on a co-main event, but it's not as bad as him being, positioned in front of a recent domestic violence victim, especially as the UFC was promoting the domestic violence victim angle for Rachel Ostovich and how it was so triumphant that she was walking in the cage, which it was. Don't want to take anything away from that, but kind of ironic that you have that and then co-main event featuring Greg Hardy. So I think we've seen that low, can't really get much lower. So just slowly but surely, we're just accepting Greg Hardy as a UFC fighter and one who finds himself on the main card on a regular basis. Also, Mark, who would you rather take a punch from, Francis, Rumble, or Carwin? I would rather not see either three of those gentlemen in a dark alley. Whatever I did to piss either one of those men, I apologize. I'm sorry. You the man. Yeah, hard pass on all of that. Excuse me. Jason saying, even then, Faber's never sold big on pay-per-view. Couple 100,000 buys tops, even against Cruz. It's a very good point, and especially now considering the pay-per-view model of the UFC. Yeah, you can't expect the buy rate to be too high. So, but still, Urijah Faber is a name that carries a lot of casual interest. Let's see, we talk about the UFC 240 card, can a little bit, but yeah. So let me pull that one back up. UFC 240 is Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar in the main event, Chris Cyborg and Felicia Spencer in the co-main. I do think that is a very interesting fight for Holloway. Edgar, while I'm definitely think Holloway should win that fight, Edgar is a guy who seems to just kind of rise to the occasion at strange times. I think he can at least give Holloway something to think about. And I think also, too, we have to be concerned about the damage that Holloway just endured against Dustin Poirier. And are there any lasting effects? Because Holloway does take a lot of damage in his fights. So that's something to keep an eye on. Chris Cyborg and Felicia Spencer should be interesting just to see Cyborg fight another featherweight, a true featherweight, like someone who's got real credentials at featherweight. So that's something else. Okay. Carrie Giant Squid Lip. Oh, that is a hell of a name. What did you think of main and co-main stoppages, early or right on? I think the main event stoppage was definitely early. That definitely looked early to me. The co-main event stoppage, I have to rewatch that. I quite honestly did not check out the replay a whole lot. But my initial viewing as it was live, I thought it was just a little early. Not a whole lot early, but a little bit early. Tommaso asking, do you think Colby versus Lawler will be a fight of the year contender? Which fight is currently your fight of the year? My fight of the year, my fight of the forever, is Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum at this point. That was fantastic. I would, excuse me, not sure if my heart rate can handle a fight better than that. That was incredible. Now, Colby versus Lawler has the makings of a good fight, but it could also be, it can go several ways. It can be a blowout. Like I wouldn't be surprised at all if Colby goes in for the takedown, doesn't get it, and then we see Lawler versus Askren 2, except that Lawler gets the win. I could see that happening. Could also see Lawler like getting overwhelmed by the pace and then just slowly getting worn down and it looking a lot like the RDA fight. But I just don't think Colby Covington is well-rounded enough to do that. RDA is such a good striker. And such a good grab. Like he's such a good fighter all around that he's a threat everywhere. Colby Covington, keep in mind, got outboxed by Damian Maia not that long ago. So for him, for Robbie Lawler to respect his stand-up enough to give him the opportunity to make this a fight of the year contender, I find highly unlikely. So I think it's a blowout one way or the other. Okay. Ishmael saying, man, I really wish Herb Dean let that fight go longer, as do I. I do think that fight should have gone longer. See, Mike S saying, good fight night, great fight night next week. Yeah, next week should be a great fight night. But my wife is rightfully insisting that I enjoy my birthday work free. So I highly doubt that I will be watching it live, but I am very excited um, to check this card out. So next week, RDA Leon Edwards, of course, is the main event. Alexei Oleinik and Walt Harris sounds pretty interesting to me. That could be a weirdly good fight. Greg Hardy and Juan Adams, of course, we talked about. James Vick and Daniel Hooker. Sign me all the way the fuck up. Man, that sounds fantastic. That sounds great. Trinaldo and Alex Hernandez. Yes, please. That sounds spectacular. Arlovsky versus Ben Rothwell should be an interesting rematch there. Good to see Raquel Pennington come back against Irene Aldana. That sounds kind of interesting. Roxanne Modafferi and Jennifer Maia should be a very interesting rematch as well. Yeah, there's some good stuff on this card. So I certainly hope you guys enjoy that. I will most likely be watching a replay, but should be a fun one. Let's see here. Atheist for the Cause saying, I think the Gustafsson Smith fight was the worst result of the year for the UFC. I would say maybe Gustafsson retiring wasn't a good result for the UFC, but Anthony Smith getting that win, you need a body like that at light heavyweight. You need a name that you recognize. You need a guy who's going to fight exciting, and there are plenty of up and coming contenders that need the challenge. So Anthony Smith can provide that. Can provide that stepping stone to the title. Not to say that he will lay down and accept being a stepping stone, but he's a good litmus test for the guys that we're hoping get into the title picture against John Jones, presuming that he remains the light heavyweight champion and doesn't lose the belt either by vacating it for heavyweight or, Thiago Santos getting the second scorecard he needed. Who do I favor? Mike Perry or Luque? I would go with Luque on that one. Mike Perry is like the consummate knucklehead in the way he fights. So he's a guy who's always going to fight to do what he shouldn't do. So this is a guy who decided he was going to take down Cowboy and then was surprised that Cowboy has submissions. So yeah, that's the guy. Luque should win that one. Yeah, Vic versus Hooker should be fire. Rob asking, what has Vic learned? I don't know, but we shall find out. We should definitely find out. And I think it's also important to know what has Hooker learned. Dan Hooker was like the new guy, man, that we really were getting our hopes up about. He was calling for everything. And rightfully so, man. He was smoking those guys that the UFC put in front of him until they put him in front of Edson Barboza. So yeah, I'm excited for that one. Happy Hernandez is back in his hometown, looking for Hooker to get back in the win column. Who should get the title shot next, Reyes or Corey Anderson? I say Corey Anderson if you had to choose between those two. Corey Anderson, granted, I can understand people not getting too enthused about him fighting for a light heavyweight title, but, for lack of other options, he's earned it. And you kind of just want to get it out the way. As mean as that may sound, I think just get it out the way. I think they should have just given him the light heavyweight title shot before Daniel Cormier fought at UFC 230 at heavyweight against Derek Lewis, just for DC to go ahead, get another title defense at light heavyweight under his belt, this time after becoming champ, doing what Amanda Nunes did last week, going back down in the lower weight class and defending that belt to cement his legacy. I think that would have been more of a legacy builder for Daniel Cormier, but a title shot for Corey Anderson nonetheless. Tommaso saying Perry's reaction to finding out his coach knew Cowboy had submissions and didn't tell him was hilarious. Yes, totally agreed. That made no sense to me. It was quite the moment. So when you're trying to handicap a Mike Perry fight, these are the things you need to consider. You need to consider the things that most people consider obvious that he doesn't. It's like, that's why I enjoy that Cowboy Oliveira fight so much, because it was bad fight IQ versus bad fight IQ. Which guy could make the worst decision at the worst possible time, and the other one would win. That's what that fight played out to me. All right, so Tommaso also saying retirement fight at 205, Anderson Silva versus Luke Rockhold. Do you like this idea? I do kind of like that idea. If I'm Luke Rockhold or if I'm Anderson Silva, I don't really see the point in continuing to fight. But if they are going to fight again, that fight makes as sense as any other. And quite frankly, I think Anderson Silva wins that fight. I think we've seen Luke Rockhold. Yeah, we've seen where his head is at. He should just go ahead and stick full time with modeling, because I think him as a viable contender in the light heavyweight division requires a sense of commitment and respect for his opponents that he doesn't have. You know, I think he's physically capable of doing a lot more, even with an increasingly worrisome chin. He's still capable of doing a lot, but I don't see it happening for him. Who do I think Nunes should face next? I think Nunes should face the winner of Felicia Spencer and Chris Cyborg next. That should be the next one for her. In the meantime, GDR can either fight Caitlin Vieira or wait for Nunes to come back down to bantamweight for that fight. That is if GDR doesn't try to parlay that into a featherweight title shot. All right, everybody. So I think we're going to wrap this up. Unless there's any more questions you guys want to drop in the chat, I'll address them real quick. But I do want to get some writing done, and you can hear me coughing and everything. My voice still isn't quite what it should be after my cold. So let's see. Tomas saying, do you agree with Bisping saying his critique of Luke is that Luke, besides not respecting his opponents, has no inside boxing skills? Totally agree. Rockhold shows zero boxing defense, like zero concept of boxing defense. You know, at least a lot of times when guys show poor defense, you know, as far as head movement is concerned, or even like bad shot selection or whatever, or taking unnecessary chances, they might put their hands back up. Like their hands do come back up right away. Rockhold stays with that lead hand really low, and not even in like the Bruce Lee, like Jeet Kune Do sense, where it's lower, but it's still in like a fight ready position where you could parry off the front hand or come up for like a quick karate style block or something like that. It's just down. It's down with like no regard for anything coming at him. He has terrible boxing defense. So yeah, that is the biggest issue with him, beyond the not taking opponents seriously. Butterwonk saying, you don't need to be respectful to be a champ. Look at McGregor. Yeah, you don't need to be respectful to be a champ, but McGregor actually respects his opponents as viable opponents. See, that's the difference. You can be disrespectful in the sense like call somebody a name. You can be disrespectful in the sense that you even do something horrible, like talking about someone's wife or family or whatever, but you can still respect them as an opponent. You still go in there and train for them seriously, and when they're standing in front of you, you take them seriously. Luke Rockhold doesn't do that. Luke Rockhold's version of disrespect is worse than in a fight sense than, you know, saying unspeakable racial slurs or something like that, because he is not treating his opponent as if they are a real opponent. He's treating them as if they're just there to be a punching bag, which no one is. When he was standing there facing Jan Blachowicz, and all he's thinking about is, oh, I'm going to smoke this guy and get to John Jones next. Yeah, that doesn't work too well when Blachowicz knocks you upside your head. All right, so let's see what else we got here. Looking forward to Gabriel Silva's debut. That's Anderson Silva's son, I believe, right? Isn't Gabriel Silva Anderson's son? Looking forward to seeing that too. How good do you think Julia Budd is? I think she is at the top of her game right now. Yeah, she certainly is. She looked great last night. She looked really great last night. I want to see more. I want to see more what Julia Budd has to offer. She's much improved, and if only we could have a real featherweight division in the UFC. There'll be more to compare it against as far as what Julia Budd can do at Bellator. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if some of that talent started making its way over to Bellator sooner than later. Like I think the results of the upcoming Cyborg Spencer fight and what should result in Nunes fighting the winner of that will determine the future of the women's featherweight division. That division essentially doesn't exist. So, I mean, look at this again real quick here. The UFC's featherweight rankings show only Amanda Nunes as champion. It shows nothing else. And we know Cyborg is, I think, on the last fight of her contract. So, yeah, I don't see the featherweight division sticking around long. And the featherweight division doesn't stick around long. Yeah, Cyborg's gone. I would expect her to, if she doesn't retire, to re-sign with Scott Coker. And of course, Coker would let her, have one-off fights in Ryzen and whatnot. So it wouldn't be as restrictive as a UFC contract. Megan Anderson would leave the promotion as well. There's no way in hell she makes 135. I don't see her sticking around in the UFC if there's no featherweight division. Yeah, so some talent might go over there, and when I say some talent, like literally 2 or 3 people, and that's it. All right. Okay, so we can go ahead and wrap this up. I do appreciate everyone who jumped in the chat with your comments, with your questions, and keeping the conversation flowing. Also want to give big shout out to the homie Jay at Sherdog, who is feeding me some good stuff in the Slack chat right now, making sure I stay on point with some statistics and whatnot, as he is the resident stat man there. One thing he asked me to, would Faber beat Renan Barão at this point? Yes, I think he would beat Renan Barão at this point. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So Ishmael saying subscribed. Ishmael, thank you, sir. And as always, I always forget to ask everyone to like and subscribe. I always forget to do that, and it's an important thing. All these YouTubers do it, but I always forget it. But Ishmael, thanks for subscribing, and thanks for reminding me. So please, if you are not already subscribed, if you haven't already liked it, please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And if you could share this, share it with a friend. Tell that friend to share it with 10 friends. Keep the combo going, man. We got a lot of good stuff coming up. So, all right. So what I have on the horizon, as soon as this broadcast ends, I'm going to rip the audio, put it on my SoundCloud page, soundcloud.com/AntWalkerMMA. I also will begin writing The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, the weekly post-fight series, just detailing a few things in particular about the card. So I have a good idea what direction I'm going to go in for this one. So check that out. Should go live tomorrow. Additionally, I have some upcoming stuff for MMA On Point. As you guys know, I'm one of the script writers there. So I got one script I just turned in. Another one I hope to turn in tomorrow for them. Also, Ask Ant, the mailbag column. I don't know if it dropped today, but I submitted it yesterday, so it should be out today, if not tomorrow. And what else we got coming up? The weekly panel discussion show that I started over at Sherdog called Off the Chain. That's going to be going live Tuesday at noon Pacific time. That will premiere. We record that Monday evenings. So a panel of 4 of us will discuss the important issues in MMA. Hope you guys enjoy that show. That's on the Sherdog YouTube page, as well as the Trenches, the live chat that I do with Jason Burgos. Do want to apologize once again for my absence last week. I was in Vegas for UFC 239, caught a really bad cold a couple of days before the fight, so I was in no shape to do a post-fight show after I finished all my writing duties and stuff Sunday. And yeah, so sorry I left you guys hanging. I missed you. Hope you missed me as well. So anyway, follow me on Twitter at AntWalkerMMA. And yeah, until next time. So also, please make sure you let me know if you want me to do a pre-fight show or a post-fight show Sunday, since my birthday is Saturday, and I will be doing the family thing and hanging out and trying to enjoy myself for a change. So you guys know what to do. Stay beautiful, stay positive, and no matter what, you got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.